Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our evening event. Hi, folks at Tundra Taqueria. You're going to be part of our event tonight, but hopefully you find it really interesting. My name is Kathy Roeder. I'm the Director of Communications for the Port of Seattle, and I'll be facilitating this evening's event. This is the capstone of what's been a really phenomenal day, celebrating the end of major construction here in the North Satellite, and looking forward to what's coming here. You can see we have some of our really phenomenal dining and retail establishments that are open, and we're looking forward to a lot more opening in December and the first quarter of the year. So a great time to be here. Just kind of housekeeping, we'll get to our panel of experts in a minute. I want to recognize that we have a really gorgeous audience that's here today, folks who are working in travel and tourism and hospitality here in our region. We also have an audience that's online, and we will be taking questions from both our online live stream audience and folks who are here today. So as you're listening to the panelists, please be thinking about questions you may want to ask. I did reference that earlier today we had an event here also celebrating the opening of this event, or opening of this space and the end of major construction. And we had 5 live acts, and the CEO of Sub Pop, Megan Jasper, was here as the MC for our live performance, inaugurating this stage. And she was talking about how music, culture makes us better people. And it's one thing that we really love about experiencing live music. And I was reflecting on how I think that's one of the things that I really love about travel. And I think something that we all really love about travel. And that's what brings us here today is we love travel. We've made it part of our lives, part of our careers, and we're here to talk about it. So that is where we are. I'm going to ask since it's evening, end of a long workday, we do want this to be very conversational. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, share a story about either a recent trip you've taken or a trip you're very much looking forward to taking. And I'm going to start with you, Nissy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nissy Atassi. I am a Senior Director in Marketing at Expedia Group. Really excited to be here. I think what I'm most looking forward to travel-wise is an upcoming trip that I'm planning to take to London in February. So it'll be my first international trip since the start of the pandemic. So I'm really excited to get back out there and get back overseas.
Hello, everyone. Matt Hagerman with Columbia Hospitality. Is that on? That's dead completely. Hey, everyone. Matt Hagerman with Columbia Hospitality. We manage hotels and resorts across the West. Most excited about 2 trips. One tomorrow, I'll be right back here to head out to LA to go visit a hotel that we're opening in the spring at the campus of City of Hope, which is an amazing cancer research facility. And then the daydream is getting to the place where we can take our young children to Disneyland again, and that's going to be as soon as we possibly can.
Hello, hello. I am Tash Haynes. I am a photographer, blogger, and content creator based out of Tacoma, Washington. I feel like I live here at the airport. But the trip that I'm looking forward to, my husband and I take our daughters on an international trip every year. We had a baby before the pandemic and a baby during the pandemic. And so I'm looking forward to taking all of my kids on their first international trip. I don't know where we're going yet. Maybe Africa. Figuring it out.
It's hard to lead after Africa. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kevin Lemme. I oversee long-term market development and competitive analysis for Alaska Airlines. So, in other words, I get to pick new destinations that we fly to. I'm most excited for in 2 weeks from tomorrow, Alaska Airlines will be flying nonstop from Seattle to Belize. I look forward to go down there, practice some diving, and enjoy everything that country has to offer in the Caribbean.
Thank you, Kevin. If there is someone here who could help us with mics, I think that Matt's might have a problem that we don't know how to solve. He's done all the right things. Okay, so we don't have a very formal strategy for sending questions to people, so I'm just going to say questions and invite you guys to comment on them. But Kevin, since you mentioned destinations, that is something that I wanted to get into right away. we saw a big shift here at our airport. What were the top destinations? And I'm curious how you all in your industries have seen changes in destinations and how you see that trend either holding up or developing in 2022.
The primary focus has been around leisure markets. So as business demand still not has recovered fully, the airlines have focused a lot on developing new leisure markets to explore. Since the pandemic started, Alaska Airlines has started 71 new markets, and the lion's share of those have been entirely to leisure destinations. An example being like Fort Myers, Jackson Hole, Belize coming later this winter. When you look at the other carriers, the trend has been similar. As people are now working remotely and they're able to work from different places, another big connection has been building out cities that previously didn't have a ton of air service. Alaska, we've focused a lot of capacity on building out Boise as people from California and other regions have migrated there. Another huge city for development has been Austin. Tons of air service has been put into Austin by all carriers as people migrate there from California and other parts of the country.
Two in a row. Similar to what Kevin was saying, we're seeing lots of drive-to destinations. That's been a pretty well-known trend through this. The fun part is that it is continuing. As air travel starts to come back and we're all getting a little more comfortable being here, the drive-to destinations are just as busy as they ever have before. And at the beginning of this, even right after you could start to travel again, it's just kept up in full steam from there.
And I would say on the Expedia side, every year we actually look at our search data to determine what are going to be the trending destinations for the year ahead. And when we looked at our data just recently, we actually saw that a lot of the very common places that travelers, really enjoy going domestically are actually trending again for 2022. So places like Riviera Maya, Maui, Florida is very, very popular. Destin, St. Petersburg. So lots of desire to, I think, go back to the basics a little bit. A lot of destinations that perhaps people may have missed or perhaps took for granted are going to definitely be really popular in 2022. And then, of course, big city destinations internationally, such as Rome and Paris and London, are also trending to likely be some of the hottest destinations for 2022.
As a traveler, I went to Mexico and I also went to Destin, Florida with my family, and a lot of bloggers that I follow also did the same thing, so I think that's exactly right. I think we're definitely going to those places that maybe we're not ready to go to big international destinations, but where are some beautiful places in the United States that we've missed or that we wouldn't choose before to go somewhere else?
So one thing that we've also noticed here at the airport is kind of the rise of leisure travel recovery. The leisure travel recovered much more rapidly, particularly in the spring when vaccinations became more widely available. And it came back strong, right? Like really strong. And so we see people traveling, but one question I have for you is how are you seeing that they may be traveling different? With a little bit more gusto, perhaps.
I think, a lot of us have heard the term revenge travel, which sort of was coined, I'd say, at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was this idea that there would be all of this pent-up demand for people emotionally to want to travel, that they were going to sort of really go big when they can. And that's something that we've actually really seen come true. So Expedia recently did a survey where they sort of asked travelers, what are they looking forward to? What are their plans? And 65% said that they were planning to really go big for their next trip. And the data is already starting to prove that. I think, a third of our travelers have actually increased the star ratings for the hotels. So if they typically went to 3-star hotels, they're now staying at 4-star hotels. I think specifically to the cruise industry, the sort of higher class cabins or the higher fare cabins, the ones with suites or with balconies, those are all up by almost 10%. So there's clearly a trend that we're seeing for people who are willing to splurge a little bit or spend a little bit more. I think really, probably because they've really started to see the value that travel brings in their life and they want to make sure that they can maximize it now that it's available again.
Yeah, that's very much playing out. Once they arrive at those 3- and 4-star hotels, as they've upgraded, we are all going big once we're there. So spa bookings up a significant amount from 2019 per occupied room. So for the same guest, they're spending 20% more in general in spas. At our destinations in Walla Walla, they're coming home with more wine. They're going to take the vacation home. They don't know when they're going to get to go again. So they're going big on those fronts once they get there as well. Any property that has a full home or a larger suite, those are getting bought first instead of usually they're later or in specialty bookings. So the go big is playing out on property as well.
As a traveler, I feel like I'm definitely more apt to upgrade and to pick the destinations that make it easy for me to do the things that I want to do. So if there's a concierge service, if there's room service, especially since that was stopped in so many places, I love choosing, and I know that this is true of other people that I follow, choosing places where I can have like the luxury experience, but still be with my family in kind of a isolated space to keep them safe. And so I agree with that 100%.
Our best-selling products through the pandemic have been our premium class extra legroom section, as well as the first class product. And as others have said, just a lot of people, they've saved money through the pandemic, not really traveling, so they have a lot of budget to spend. There's also a large population that they had trips planned before the pandemic, they canceled it, and now they're looking to use all their flight credits. So philosophically, when they're booking that flight, they aren't necessarily thinking about the extra cost for those classes because they've already spent that money and have that credit in their wallet.
One trend that I wanted to check in on that was a big part of our 2021 experience was what I call outdoor everything. That, we just tried, we like wintered outside, learned a new word for it. What was that? Frulift or something? Maybe somebody remembers that word. It was like the joy of being outside during winter and fire pits, right? So I'm curious if that trend, outdoor everything, is still kind of part of what you're seeing in what guests and passengers are looking for, less so for you, Kevin. But if that's still kind of part of the amenities, or what other amenities like spas and some of the things that you were mentioning are passengers and guests really looking for?
Yeah, a couple of things that are coming up. Concierge service has already been mentioned today, but concierge service is a big piece of this. We're a little more skeptical of what we're going to find on the other end of Kevin's flight, and are we going to be comfortable there? So there's lots of questions and lots of time on the phone, and outdoor is one of those. Where am I going to eat outdoors? How am I going to spend time outdoors? In the middle of this pandemic, we launched a puffy jacket dining series where all of our restaurants would do something, and the whole point is wear your puffy jacket, be outside, it's going to rain, and that's great, and we're going to keep it up because it was enjoyable, we just like being outside, and now there's a whole additional reason to do it. So that's very much sticking around, as well as a lot of high maintenance needs that we have now in travel that we didn't have before.
And I would say we definitely saw that shift, especially over the summer. National parks were huge, the summer of 2020, but they continued to be massive this past summer. Our sister brand, Vrbo, which, is predominantly in the vacation rental business, they were selling out for key areas close to sort of some of the biggest national parks really, really early on in the season. So I think even as the pandemic hopefully starts to, become less and less of a, restrictor for travel, I think it's going to take travelers a bit of time to work their way back up to sort of going back to normal. It's going to be difficult, I think, for people to just jump into a really big crowded room or a really big crowded city. So they might want to ease their way back in, but still erring on the side of things that are a little bit more outdoors and have more space.
I feel like some of the major cities have done a really beautiful job, too, of creating an outdoor atmosphere that you want to be a part of. My family was recently in New York, and all of the restaurants have these beautiful outdoor stations that are so beautifully decorated that you almost want to be outside to have that experience. So I feel like how we're dining, how we're vacationing is different because we're getting a new experience that we haven't ever been forced to have before. And so I think that's also kind of exciting. It's like a new way of being and kind of experiencing the things that we love. So I think that trend will stick around just because we didn't know that it was possible to enjoy those things before.
I'm going to get to audience questions soon, so I hope you're thinking of a few and looking for any questions that we have coming in from our social audience as well. I did want to ask about customer stress. because we know that's a big part of it, a big part of the travel and hospitality story right now. I just overheard a couple that was walking through the airport, and the wife was saying, or the woman was saying to the man, it couldn't be more complicated. And I was like, I think we all kind of have that feeling sometimes with like, the rules are always changing and there's new rules and you have to remember to bring new things. So I would love to hear you share how your organizations are working to help customers manage stress or bringing customer service forward more differently during this difficult time.
I think for us at the airline, we're always making improvements to the app and allowing you to book through different channels than just your laptop. But the biggest thing that we're focused right now is just offering a consistent experience. And when you book that flight, whether it be on the app, online, through Expedia or another OTA, that when that booking is made, we fulfill that promise that we made of operating the flight on time, that schedule, on that day. There's just a lot of challenges going on throughout all industries with staffing, as well as predicting where demand is and bringing planes back into service. So we've focused a lot on the next 3-4 months, making sure that the schedule that we're publishing and that we're selling is a commitment to our guests that we're able to actually fulfill.
I would say on the Expedia side, one thing that we realized was that, transparency was going to be our best approach to dealing with the trials and tribulations of customers, just canceling and rescheduling. Obviously, during the pandemic, we used the term unprecedented times, but that was really, I would say, the understatement of 2020. But we quickly realized that, the customers didn't want to be placated. They wanted to just know what was going on. And then we quickly realized that they really fundamentally didn't understand just how complicated the airline industry actually is, or how it works when you purchase travel on sites like Expedia. It's not just like buying a shirt from Nordstrom. So when you go to return it, the refund policy is not going to be as quick, or it's not going to be the same. So we took the approach of really trying to educate travelers and sort of do a series of sort of OTA one-on-ones, online travel agents. Really helping to educate them, help them to understand sort of how we work, and then just really taking things with an extra level of transparency that we just never did before. And they responded really, really well to it. And I think it's something that has fundamentally changed us as a company, and it's changed how we are going to communicate with our customers moving forward.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about and news about the frustrated traveler and the unruly airline guest, or that we have hostesses in restaurants as of a couple days ago now checking vaccine cards, and they're the vaccine police in a restaurant. That you hear a lot of news about that, but there's been a different shift behind the scenes. We as an industry had months of no customers. I mean, closed restaurants, empty hotels. And in general, there's a new appreciation for someone who can go into a restaurant and eat. And the vast majority of people are wonderfully kind and appreciative of that. And on the other side of the table, for the team member, we've always been preaching as a service industry that every guest matters, and we should be appreciative that they're coming in and using our business. Boy, there's no more obvious than when they're not. And now they are again. And so there's this whole reset of, wow, I'm just thrilled that you're here in my restaurant, and they're thrilled that they're able to be in this restaurant. So in general, there's a massive level of positivity with some flare-ups of stuff that you see on the news. And that's been a healthy reset for the hospitality industry.
And as a travel blogger, I feel like we have a unique opportunity to educate our followers about what it means to travel. I think there's a cost to travel, and there's like a responsibility to understand how to move and how to travel through. And so I try really hard to share like the really glamorous parts of travel, but also the real life parts of travel. Like I travel with my kids. It's not always easy. We miss flights. We're late. And how we like navigate those spaces, how we set things in place so that we can move through the airport, or so that it's easier. And so I just think there's a real opportunity there to also educate the traveler from our platforms. And so I try to do a lot more of that on our trips.
I think in general, companies, when they think about marketing, they try to not showcase, air the dirty laundry or what might be ugly about the industry or things like that. But that doesn't really fly anymore with people, right? Like, consumer activism is so big right now in the world of cancel culture and things like that. Hiding behind, a velvet rope or a curtain doesn't really work, right? they want to hear your truths. They want to see brands be as authentic as they feel like they are, sort of as individuals. So actually acknowledging some of these things, like we know if you misspell your name wrong when you book a ticket, we know that is really, really difficult to change.
I've done that. I've done that.
A lot of people do it, believe it or not. And so just now we actually acknowledge it versus saying, oh, it's fine, we'll take care of it. But we can't take care of it.
I cried that day. I cried that day because my TSA pre-check didn't work. And I was like, what?
That is the worst. I'm like, I need my pre-check to work.
Sorry, I went back to a really dark place. I would like to open this up to our audience who is here today. And if we have questions from these folks or anything from social commentary that we want to flag for people, but I know you have. Yes, thank you. We have a microphone that will make its way to you soon.
Hi, everyone.
A little louder, please.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everyone. My question is, there we go. My question is, how are you taking care of your employees in this time? Like my son.
Oh, no.
My son just reminded me, he was like, Mom, do you remember this person at the airlines that was rude to us? I know you guys don't have that problem. But with all the stress of 2020 and, with all the volume now, how are you taking care of your employees?
I mean, I would say for the first time, I've been with Expedia Group for 5 years, and even my company before that I was with 10 years, I've never seen the discussion of mental health and wellness within the company be at the forefront as much as it has, I would say, in the last 18 months. It's something that, internally, our communications team is constantly reinforcing the resources that are available to employees, encouraging everybody to really take the time that they need for themselves, and making sure that they're focusing on their health and well-being and putting that at the forefront. And it's terrible that it takes a global pandemic for companies to really start to be able to focus on that, but we can call that sort of a silver lining of COVID, is that companies now, at least at Expedia Group, it's such a huge focus. It's something that all of our managers are really trained in, making sure that everybody knows the resources that are available to them. So I feel like that's helped, and hopefully the employees feel like it's a safe space to speak to their managers and voice when they're struggling.
This is a big conversation right now. Everybody knows what's happening in the employment world. It's harder than ever. So if you're trying to take care of your team members now, it's too late. Taking care of them for however many years you've been in business was important. So if you didn't, you're finding out right now. And you're finding out in a really stark way. So employee-first companies for the entire life of the company is mattering now more than ever. So that's item one. And there are a lot of great groups doing some really specific things. We're one of which, Starbucks is another, that reacted very, very quickly and created team member assistance programs. So we launched a foundation in a matter of 2 days when we saw what was really happening. Team members were able to donate, so it was the team members helping team members and giving micro donations to those that might need it. It was rent this month or groceries this month, as the restaurant industry was falling apart there very quickly. So there's a million examples of that, but those are some things that have taken place.
Our company empowered the employees several years ago with what we really define as the customer service revolution, beyond service, and empowering all the employees to make the decision that they feel is the right one, that might not directly fall in line with what's with our policy, but empowering each one of our employees to make that decision. And a huge focus through the pandemic has been making sure that our employees feel safe flying our airplanes, working in our airplanes, and working at our airports. And I think one of the biggest things that we've done is trying to diffuse situations in their infant stages and not letting them evolve into a large event. So when you check in on our app, it's going to talk about your expectation to wear a mask. Well, if you check in at the kiosk and check in your bag, those agents are going to remind you about the mask. After you go through security, at the gate, they're going to remind you to wear a mask. The captain's going to make an announcement to wear a mask. Where at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was probably just an announcement from the flight attendant saying, you need to wear a mask for this whole flight. So trying to make sure that the guest is not surprised by this, they understand it through all the stages so that this doesn't evolve into a large situation about mask compliance or something else with the pandemic.
It's so good to see all of you guys wearing masks and doing the right thing. Tash, you have a lot on your plate and you travel all the time. You want to just speak to your own sort of how you manage stress while traveling, especially when you're traveling with the children and all that?
Yeah, we're still working on that. No, I'm joking. I feel actually the safest in the airport. Someone asked me recently, like, how do you travel so much? Aren't you afraid? And I feel like the airport is one of the safest places to be right now because everyone does take it so seriously. And you can see that the airlines are doing their best to make sure that the planes are clean and that everyone is doing what they can to kind of follow the rules and take care of themselves. So I don't actually feel a lot of stress traveling because I feel like everyone who's making the choice to travel knows what the expectations are and they're showing up to do their part. And I feel like all of the airlines that we've flown, our favorite Alaska, of course, does a really amazing job of like educating their flyers about what they're supposed to do. My kids also really miss travel, and they're almost willing to do the little ones are little. They're 2 and 1, or not 1 yet, but they're willing to do what it takes to get on the plane to go. So I feel like it's been a really great process. I think it's just about we have pre-check, we have clear, we put things in place to make our travel through the airport a lot easier. Instead of buying the basic flights now, we're upgrading to the main flights so that if someone gets sick or if something happens, we're able to reschedule or use the credit for later. We're doing all of the things that you guys talked about where people like are upgrading or they're putting things in place to make sure that there's flexibility in their travel. Like that has become really important to us. And we make sure that those things are in place so that we can have a great experience. And we're also prepared for things to not go the way that we intend for them to go. And so we're leaving space for that as well.
It's something that we talk about a lot for the airport. Is a little bit of preparation can go a long way, and especially we have new tools that we're rolling out. Spot Saver, if you're not familiar with it, it's a free service that allows you to reserve your TSA check-in time. So it's something that you can do very quickly in advance, but saves you a lot of uncertainty as you arrive. We have a new service called Order SEA. You can order food from any restaurant.
Is that the robot?
Yes.
That's so cool.
It's a robot. So you can order, using our app, you can order food from any restaurant in the airport and either just mobile order, go pick it up, or have it delivered to you. So if you got to have your Wendy's, but you're not here when it opens in January or later this year, you can get it delivered to you somewhere. So, there's a little like rolling suitcase that follows a human. And it is very cute. So anyway, just little things that can make your trip more predictable or customizable. I'm curious if you all are finding the checklist has changed, right? The mental checklist. And how are you helping passengers prepare for the journey differently so that they're not stressed out and they have the best time possible when they get to you?
I think honestly, a big part of what we're doing is trying to really inform people that the checklist needs to change. Because I think the biggest issue that travelers are going to have, if they are not prepared coming in and knowing what to expect, it's going to be a really different experience. So we are constantly reinforcing that, telling people to make sure you check the restrictions of the destination you're going to. Make sure you triple check whether you need a COVID test or whether you need proof of vaccination, whether you are having to get on the flight or the destination that you're going to. Is the city going to allow you to go and dine indoors if you're not vaccinated? What are the mask mandates? Constantly reminding people that they need to look into that stuff before they book, and then again before they actually travel is what we're really focused on, because at the end of the day, a lot of us are going to revert back to the same behaviors that we had pre-pandemic travel-wise, which is great, and that shows the resilience of travelers. But at the same token, we need to just be much more acutely aware of the evolving landscape that we're in. And so we're just trying to constantly remind people that they need to really be on top of it. And we also really try to remind people to, specifically for the Expedia Group brands, download our app, because as things are changing pretty rapidly, the app can be really quick to send you a push notification and to alert you of that change. And I've noticed myself, it's just as a leisure traveler, that when I do download the apps for the specific airline that I'm flying, or even the hotel that I'm going to, even the car rental company, it is going to allow me for contactless check-in or not having to interact with a person at the front desk. So I would say that shift to mobile and that shift to app is probably not only going to be one that can alleviate a lot of stress, but also give you a little bit more peace of mind potentially.
One of the big ones for us is the booking curve has become significantly more compressed than it used to, and people are now booking flights for their vacations a week or 2 weeks in advance. And previously, I think a lot of the mindset was, I book my flight, I have plenty of time to figure out all the other logistics. Well, when you're booking so much closer in, and when there's a microchip shortage and you can't get rental cars like you used to, a lot of people are booking flights and they end up in their destination not being able to find a hotel or not being able to find rental cars. So I really encourage when you're booking your travel to make sure that your whole package you're able to fulfill. And it's great that you got a flight, and we're really happy that you selected to fly that destination, but not all of the infrastructure has kept up with that, and it's important to check and make sure that you're able to fulfill that full experience versus just previously booking the flight.
I just have to say, like, it's completely reordered how you book your travel, I think, in some ways, if we can just talk about rental cars for a minute. Because one of you, I can't recall who, was explaining this to me, what happened with rental cars, because...
Who here has booked a U-Haul when they arrived in Hawaii? Anyone?
I booked a Jeep with a tent on top because we couldn't find another car and ended up camping. So, yeah, what's going on with rental cars?
I think, so what most people don't realize is that car rental companies buy cars the same way a lot of us buy cars. And so when the pandemic hit, a lot of the car rental companies started to sell off some of their fleet to recoup some of those dollars. And so when they sold off their fleet, that meant that when travel came back, that they had to buy those cars again. But as Kevin mentioned, there was a microchip shortage. So their cars aren't being produced at the speed at which they used to be. So putting all that together, we're seeing an incredibly massive amount of compression. On top of that, when you get into places like Hawaii, where people aren't driving in, right? So it's not easy to get those cars there. You're seeing an absolute massive shortage. So where people oftentimes probably were booking their car rental as the absolute last thing for whatever their package was, now it actually should be one of the main things if you know you absolutely need a car at whatever that destination is. So that's sort of what's been happening in the car rental industry and what's driving that compression a little bit.
I am going on a trip shortly. I don't have my flights, but I have my rental cars and all of the destinations, because it's so hard to get a rental car and you're paying like triple what you used to rent a car per day.
So is that changing your choices on your destinations?
100%. It's just so expensive.
So like more city or more walkable?
So I'm kind of choosing places where my family can walk to the places that we need, and we only have to like get an Uber to go. Like when we were in New York, we chose to Uber instead of like rent a car, but it's making a huge difference because it's almost like another flight to get a rental car.
Yeah, we have a resort 20 minutes north of Yellowstone, and we're actively buying vehicles for the resort to pick people up and get them from the airport to the lodge and then into the park. So we've launched tours to try to compensate for this, because it's so severe that people are not coming to Montana because you have to drive. I mean, what are you going to do? You're not taxiing around Montana. You need a vehicle. So we're actually purchasing them to try to solve for this in the short run.
Kevin, everybody wants to talk rental cars.
Well, I'm curious, like for Expedia or other OTAs, have you gone to partnering with alternative solutions like Turo or Uber or Lyft, so that when they're booking their package, there are other ways beyond just the traditional rental car facilities?
We haven't, but what we do is we have an email that we send to travelers right before their trip. We call it the Bon Voyage email. And what we've started doing is making sure that we're providing them with the resources within the destination. What's the best way to get around? What do you need to know? What are some of the key pieces of information? So we are doing that, but we are constantly just trying to remind travelers that if you do need to book a rental car, that you need to book it early.
Okay, audience questions. Mark.
I'm good. There we go. I have an observation and then a question for you. So the observation, and I'm Mark Everton. I'm with the Seattle Southside Regional Tourism Authority. That's actually right across the street. And I'm in this airport probably 2 or 3 times a week because I commute from that state to the south. The observation is, I think you were spot on with the 3 C's. It's complicated, there needs to be communication, and there needs to be consistency. And over the last 4 or 5 months, I've become a bit of a voyeur of meltdowns. And so I watch these meltdowns occurring, and they're occurring at TSA, they're occurring at the gate, on the plane, in the hotels. And it's because people have done everything that's been expected of them, and then it doesn't happen. It doesn't get delivered. And so that's the challenge. And just a quick analogy, the empathy that your staff has makes 100% difference. Mm-hmm. So when an Alaska flight attendant says, I don't want to have my mask on either, but I've had it on for 6 hours and I'm going to have it on for 2 more hours, please keep your mask on for an hour and a half. Goes a really long way from being, chided. So, and I think the same is true with hotels. It's empathy. This is why your room's not ready, and I'm sorry, but it's not ready, and let me explain to you what we're going to do to make it right. So the question part is, we're expecting corporate travel and group travel and convention travel to come back, and there's some expectation that we could be seeing early first quarter, end of January. We're going to see a huge boom of corporate travel. How are you guys going to be ready in 90 days? I mean, we're bursting at the seams. Most of my Alaska flights are, if not full, really close to full. How can we add 30%, 40% more travel on? And what's Expedia OTAs doing to prepare for it? And what's the hotel industry looking at? And sorry, it's tough for the airlines right now, but what's going to happen when that goes up 40%?
It's definitely a challenge, and where we are today is our capacity's down 15% of where it was in 2019, but our bookings are only down 10%. So that's why if anyone's flying out tonight or tomorrow, you're going to notice your flight is probably fuller than it would have been in 2019. And as we monitor business traffic coming back, we take our best guesses on where we should preemptively add capacity to. But right now, in my role, I'm looking at capacity for this next summer 2022. We purchase our crew to fly our airplanes about a month and a half in advance. So to be able for bookings to come in and shoot up in the next week, an airline really isn't set up to be able to do that. So there's going to be a period where we're learning and growing with where the demand is coming, and the capacity is going to lag where that demand comes back from. But I think that all the carriers, they talk a lot with their business partners and their corporate customers to try to understand what big events, what big conferences are coming up, where do we really need to protect capacity. The first big testament of this occurs on the 8th when foreign nationals are going to be allowed back in the United States. And we've had that international capacity, but for the most part, it's been relatively empty. And the reports now is that everyone's coming back to visit their US customers. So this is going to be the first big testament to see how does that change and how well does the existing capacity absorb the increase in demand.
We're so unbelievably ready. Bring it on. Emotionally, we're so ready for corporate travel and business travel and meetings and events, and the conference centers and the banquet facilities are one of the remaining things very, very quiet as our urban core downtown conference center, convention center hotels. So we're preparing for that as best we can. The limiting factor across the industry is going to be staff. It's going to be staff. Unlike airlines, we don't dial down our capacity in the hotel business. The rooms are there, and they're ready, It's going to be the team to facilitate that, and that's been challenging from the beginning. But anybody who's back to taking care of their team members and is thinking forward a little bit, is gearing up for that as we speak. The other interesting part is 75% of our hotels are having record years. So there's going to be a trade. Those corporate travelers are no longer at a resort. They're on corporate travel. So there's going to be a trade of those people and what they're doing. So we have full hotels all over the place now. It's those few that aren't in the middle of that resort or that drive-to destination that are going to have that big swing back. So in our company, we're going to be moving people around. So resorts might back off this false, crazy high demand that we're having right now, and downtown might be a little bit busier. So we're going to pull a couple people out of Leavenworth and get them to downtown Seattle to handle those ebbs and flows. And it'll be bumpy in the beginning. It'll be 100% occupancy on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then back down to 20. And it'll be a little bit of a bucking bronco for a while. So bracing yourself, getting ready, taking care of the team now before it actually happens is where we are.
And I would say on the Expedia side, it's very, very similar. I think just on the customer support perspective, we are constantly sort of adding new agents. We recently just added 500 new agents to account for the increase in demand that we're seeing. And we're constantly looking at forecasting and vaccination rollouts and rates just to make sure that we are adding customer support staff to match the demand that we anticipate to sell. On the supply side, we are making sure that we're constantly in communication with our airline and lodging partners to make sure that we're getting the available inventory that they have and that we can have that available on our site as well, so that when that corporate travel does come back, we've got the inventory to sell to meet that demand.
Yes, you had a question over here. Those were great answers, by the way. I could kind of listen to you guys all night, like explaining how this works.
Hi, can you talk about how your strategy has changed for influencer marketing and influencer relations now that a lot of people are working from home or working from anywhere, and other people who are following them are like, I want to go there. Where are they working from? And then for Tash, how has partnerships, how have you experienced partnerships now that all of this is happening?
I think I think on the Expedia side, we really, really leaned in and relied on content creators to help tell the return to travel story, because it's one thing if we come out and say, hey, go out and travel, and we didn't want to necessarily do that because it was such a personal, it still is a personal choice, deciding when to travel while we are still in the middle of a pandemic, right? And especially, 6 months ago when we saw that demand starting to come back, we thought, well, what's the best way to communicate all of the relevant information that we know travelers want to hear without making them feel like they're being pushed to travel, and reminding them that it's still a very personal decision. And we realized that content creators are really the best way for us to help curate and participate in that conversation in an authentic way where the travelers feel like they're being engaged and having a conversation with them versus talking at them. And so I think the way brands in the travel industry are going to probably pivot with these content creators is just leveraging them a little bit more versus just saying, hey, here's $5,000 for an Instagram post. I want it to say exactly X, Y, and Z. More so, hey, let's work together. This is a story that we're looking to tell and that we want to be a part of. How can you put your spin on it? What's your take? So really that, I would say it's going more from just leveraging them to amplify a brand story, but more so into very much a co-creation partnership.
I would 100% agree with that. I've gotten the opportunity to work with some really fun brands. I'm fairly new to this influencer world. I actually started in 2019. So considering that and looking back over the last 2 years, I've had a really amazing journey, and it's been really cool. I worked with Verbo actually, and I think, and I mentioned that just because it's an Expedia group. I actually did 2 rounds of content for them, and it was a really beautiful partnership of telling travel stories. But I think it's important too that we remember that travel looks different, and it comes in so many different forms, right? And so there are the big international trips, and then there are the road trips, but there's also the family travel where you're just nuzzled up into a house and you're just hanging out. And so I think it's communicating that if you're not ready to travel or if you're not ready for the big trip, there are so many different ways to get out there and to enjoy travel. And I think the brands have done a great job of using influencers to communicate with the audiences that trust them. And so I think that it's also about telling the story that's authentic and being an honest resource to your audience too. So it's been really fun to create with brands, and it's been really fun to be able to include our stories as a part of what we get to do to bring travel back to the forefront.
Other questions? Okay, one from the bar.
That's awesome.
So go ahead and talk straight into the mic.
So obviously, all of you have mentioned some of the impacts of this pandemic, and I believe it was the gentleman here on my right that talked about the flexible amount of demand and flexible types of demand from travelers that have forced you into this constantly changing decision-making in your industry. But what do you think are some of the lessons learned, I guess, things that might become permanent fixtures in the travel industry, whether it's, having extra planes on demand for mechanical delays like I'm experiencing this very moment, or whether it's, extra, someone mentioned partnering with Uber and things at your hotels because there's not enough rental cars. Is there things like that or more things that I'm not thinking of that's the reason I'm asking this question, that is things that we're like, okay, this is a really great idea and it works well in this pandemic, but we should keep doing it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just really want to say thank you for joining in our event. And
I think on the Expedia side, one thing that we implemented during the pandemic that will absolutely stay is, obviously there are a wide array of fare classes that you can choose when you're booking air. The most restricted fare class being basic economy. Now, when you go to Expedia, if you do select a basic economy flight, a pop-up window will come and say, this is a highly restricted fare. No changes are allowed. Being really, really clear. And there's a message that says, we really encourage you to book a flexible option. And we give them those options. And that was something that we implemented during the pandemic because it was, frankly, a bad idea, right? You don't, with the cancellations and lockdowns going in and out of effect, booking a non-cancelable or non-changeable anything was just a bad idea. That's just not going to end well for you. So we put these sort of steps in place to really make sure that the traveler knew exactly what they were getting and making sure that we're reminding them that a flexible option is a better one, and that's definitely something that's going to stay.
We've talked a lot, this gentleman brought up the 3 C's, but I really think that consistency and expectations are the 2 key things going forward, because anyone has a microphone with social media these days. So it's really important that we meet the commitment of when someone books a flight, that we fulfill what they actually booked and not running a horrible delay or something like that. But we talk about change fees. I think change fees, you talk about something that's here to stay. I think probably being able to cancel a flight and to change it for a much lower fee or for free, that's here to stay because our guests have clearly adapted quite well to having that extra flexibility, whether it's changing a flight same day or across to another day. And we've seen 3 new airlines launch in the United States during the pandemic, and all 3 of them, at the core, it's based on providing nonstop service between underserved communities and providing more convenient booking as well as a simpler fare structure. So it goes back to this, that our guests want a simpler way to book, and they don't want to connect through hubs anymore. They just want to fly nonstop and spend as little amount of time as possible at the airport and on our airplanes.
We have learned a ton about off-season in destinations. The lack of capacity in the summertime, or the need to get out of my house in November or January, forced people into Cannon Beach in November, Montana in January. Just get me out of here. And that's going to stick. So many experiences that weren't just sunshine on the beach, but other layers of experiences in these destinations were found and were many times more meaningful than just the headline reason why you went somewhere. And we're seeing that continue. And so the peak season has been pushed around the calendar. Weekdays are being booked when it used to be just weekends. So this flexibility in when I'm going to go places and why and where has changed quite a bit. And that'll be really healthy for all of us and the travel industry.
That could be very promising for Seattle, which I think to see our tourism season stretch beyond the very busy summer would be great for our economy. Tash, is there anything you've seen out there that you really hope stays?
I think the mindset around dream trips I think is going away. I think people are like, I'm gonna go. Like, I'm gonna go in case this is the only time. I'm not gonna wait for the dream trip in 20 years. Like, I'm gonna take it now. And so I think this idea of like the world being so big and it's hard to get places is going away. And people are like, I'm gonna stretch and I'm gonna go to that place and not wait. So I feel like I'm seeing more of that in that conversation, especially.
So we have time for one more question, and then we're going to go to our last round of 2022 predictions. So one more audience question. Yes.
Hi, everybody. I have a quick question about how do you balance being socially responsible versus your revenues? I think that's a big conversation to have as far as public health safety. Do you think that the responsibility lays solely on the traveler, or does the industry have a bigger role to play in that?
So I think it's a combination of both. At the end of the day, Expedia started by putting the power of booking travel into the hands of travelers, right? We democratized travel. We turned the screens around, made sure that all of the inventory was there for people. So at our core, we as a company believe that the power really sits with the traveler, and we do everything we can to make sure that they are enabled to make the right choices for them and for their family and, you know, the journey that they need to be on. But at the same token, we recognize that we, as a big corporation, we do have a little bit of a responsibility in terms of how we use our funds and, you know, the reputation that we have amongst the travel industry and how we can sort of set a gold standard, which was why a couple months ago we actually launched a big vaccination program where we were actually contributing a certain percentage of every transaction made to organizations that can help distribute COVID-19 vaccines to people around the world, because when we are in these sort of big countries that have vaccinations highly accessible, but yet we're all traveling to places where vaccinations are not accessible, what does that say about, about who we are as a company and who we are as travelers? So that sort of equitable distribution of vaccinations was one of the ways that we sort of were able to really try and take on that social responsibility. We are a big corporation. We have the opportunity to do that. So that was just one way where we felt like we could contribute.
Social responsibility is a big, big topic. And while we were all opening and closing restaurants and consolidating flights and doing all this, the world took a huge leap forward on two fronts. And this is my 2022 prediction question at the same time. While we were doing that, diversity, equity, and inclusion took a massive step forward. The world changed. And sustainability. The world changed on us, and we all saw both of those things in visceral fashion throughout this. So I think 2022 is going to be the year of those two things, and it's going to be a consumer choice. We're being told now, I don't want to stay at a hotel that isn't going to behave in a sustainable fashion from an environmental standpoint. We're hearing that more from consumers and developers when we're building hotels than we ever have before. And that's one example of how the consumer's responsibility is changing the way we're doing business, and it's a wonderful thing. It's going to be uncomfortable, and there's going to be a lot of change, but it's going to be a good change.
It's definitely, when you ask between is it something that's fully on the consumer or if it's on the business, it's definitely just as much on the business, if not more, than on the consumer. And it hasn't happened quite to a significant level in the US that it has happened in Europe, but there is, flight shaming is a thing in Europe where people refuse to fly airlines on short haul flights if they don't have good environmental practices or if they don't align with the social beliefs of that individual. So for Alaska Airlines, sustainability is huge. All of you have boxed water at your chairs, and this is a recent revision for us. We've trialed it in first class, and now it expands onto the main cabin, but we no longer have plastic bottles on our airplane. It's entirely all this boxed product that is eliminating a tremendous amount of plastic waste that eventually makes our way into landfills and oceans. We operate a newer fleet, a more fuel-efficient fleet, and continue to invest in alternative energies to see how we can reduce the amount of carbon dioxide emissions we have into the air. But absolutely, sustainability and all of this is the responsibility of the airline to work towards and to always increase, not just on the consumer.
I'd like to just add to that too, because it's a major priority for us at the airport. And some of the features that are the most behind the scenes here in this building are part of our sustainability agenda. We're collecting rainwater that flushes the toilets here in this building, which is part of our water conservation initiative. Of course, we have LED lighting. 95% of the construction material was recycled. So just an incredible conservation effort that went into it. And the building is actually heated by renewable natural gas, which is manufactured from waste at a landfill. And that was something we started last year that was major progress in reducing our carbon emissions as an airport, where we don't feel like you have a choice in how we build our buildings, so we have to make the best choice for you, really like think about your values and bring those forward in our work. And thanks for asking that, because it gave us a chance to talk about the boxed water, because I hadn't figured out how to work that in yet. So we just have 3 minutes left, and we're an airport. We care very much about being on time. So we're going to just go straight into 2022 predictions and then say thank you.
2022 is the absolute year of the GOAT trip, right? The greatest of all trips. It is going to be the year where people say yes, they are going to take that vacation. They are not going to worry about saving up for that bucket list. The bucket list becomes a reality in 2022.
I already gave my big answer. I'll add one little piece to it. It's going to be the year of the family travel. We have a lot of little ones getting vaccinated right now, and a lot of families still hiding their little ones at home who aren't vaccinated, myself included. So family travel is going to be a big push also.
They stole mine.
Oh, sorry.
Well, just add to it. Just add to it.
No, I so agree. I think we're all ready to go. We're ready to get out. We're ready to see our families. There are people that haven't met my 2 kids. Like, we're ready to get on the planes and travel, and we're ready to share about the stories that come from those travels, like the reunification with our friends and our families, and the things that we've learned over the last 2 years. Like, I think we want to put those lessons in play. So I agree. We're ready to go.
I just see like happy tears. So many happy tears at the airports.
I just think it's the year of restoring in-person communication. So many people are tired of looking at people through a box, or miss the physical affection of a hug or a handshake, or actually being able to see an individual they're talking to. So I think next year, 2022, is restoring all of that.
I want to thank our expert panel. It was really, I just appreciate, in the spirit of transparency, as we were talking about before, sharing this information so the folks who are part of our audience today who work in travel can benefit from your insights. And those of us who just love to travel can think about how we might be planning for the next year. Also want to say a big thank you to our Seattle-Tacoma International Airport team who helped produce today's event. And to the construction and project and readiness teams who are here today as part of our celebration in opening the North Satellite. So congratulations, and thanks everyone for being here.